Today's episode brings 3 unbelievable encounters. We start off with what a listener experienced deep in North Carolina and how her dog saved her life. And then we hear from Scott in the Catskills of New York as he shares what he and his friends find while exploring the local caves. Finally, we end up in Cumberland, Maryland to hear what a husband and wife find lurking in their backyard. What happens in these 3 stories is sure to keep you second guessing about spending time in the great outdoors. Now, let's get into the stories. Hi Lilith. Just so you know, this story is still a bit raw, and I'm sort of having a hard time sharing it. My fur baby, Petey, was attacked 2 weeks ago by this hideous creature. I saw it with my own eyes, and I reported it to my town's animal control, but they're not doing anything about it. Petey is a rescued pit bull, and he's the sweetest little thing. He would never be aggressive unless he thought somebody was threatening me, and that's how he got himself into this mess. I live in Locust, North Carolina, and we have a lot of woods here. Even though I'm a woman in my 40s living alone, I was never afraid at night because Petey would always let me know if anything strange was going on anywhere near the house. I don't believe in those electric fence things, and I don't tie my animals up by their necks. So sometimes, when he needed to go outside to do his business, I would just let him out in the yard and I would stand by the door and watch him. This was never a problem for us. My property has a stretch of woods in the backyard that goes on for a ways, but Petey was well trained, and he would always come right in when I whistled. So 2 weeks ago, when I was watching him from the screen door and I saw him go into the woods, I was really surprised when I whistled and he didn't come back. I was only wearing my bedroom slippers at the time because I work from home. So I had to go back into the house and put on some shoes before I went after him. I buy him these special real meat treats that he loves, so I grabbed a couple of those and put them in my pocket on the way out the door. I walked through the woods for maybe 5 minutes calling his name and clapping my hands, but I didn't see any sign of him, and I was really starting to get worried. So I stopped for a minute and listened. Maybe it was because of me walking through there, but it seemed to me that the forest was unnaturally still. No birds or anything. Even after I was quiet for a few minutes, they didn't start back up, and it kind of got me a little wary. I went a little further and I called his name some more, and then all at once, I saw something ahead of me in the bush. There was this creature that looked like a wolf, only bigger. Now we have coyotes around here, but no wolves. So I was squinting at it, trying to figure out if it was just a big dog. Coyotes aren't very big. It was kind of far away and down on all fours at the moment, so I had no reason to think it was anything supernatural. I've always been told don't act like your prey if you do see something in the woods, so I acted big, so to speak, and I yelled at it. Go on, get out of here. Unfortunately, it didn't scare one bit. Instead, it turned and looked at me, dead on, locking eyes with me. The hair on the back of my neck rose when I saw that thing's face. It had the most sinister yellow eyes, glowing like a deer's eyes do in the headlights. Its face looked off for a regular dog or even a wolf. The jaw was especially large and the ears seemed taller. But those eyes, that was the really freaky part. I couldn't look away. The beast made this low, growling sound, and my blood just froze in my veins. All those brave ideas about yelling so you don't look like prey just went out of my head in an instant. I was paralyzed with fear. I could barely breathe, and I'm sure I was giving off some kind of a fear scent that it was picking up on. The creature sniffed the air then, keeping its eyes on me, but raising its muzzle to scent the air. And I then realized it could probably smell the dog treats. Talk about appearing as prey. Right then the thing was certainly smelling the meat in my pocket. My ears started ringing and my heart was hammering like it was trying to pound right out of my chest. I just slowly backed up a step, and then another, not sure of what else to do. And then all at once it rose up on its hind legs. I couldn't believe it. It stood up, crouched over a little, but up on 2 feet, and it must have been 7+ feet tall. It roared just like a grizzly bear, not like a dog or a wolf. It was just this enraged roar, and it leapt towards me. I screamed at the top of my lungs and I ran, knowing this thing was going to kill me. I hadn't gone very far, and then all of a sudden I heard Petey barking. I turned around to look. Petey came racing out of the woods and launched himself at the beast. I screamed no, watching, totally horrified, as he clamped down on the creature's side. He hung there, the way pit bulls will, just suspended halfway up the thing by the strength of his jaw, swinging. That monster just swiped at him, roaring, and I saw its claws scrape across poor Petey's side. I know I sounded like a coward, but I was no match for this creature. I turned and I ran, whistling for Pete and hoping he would heed all of his training and follow me. I ran all the way home. I looked back once I reached the door, and thank God Petey was right behind me. We both jumped through the door, locked it, and I called 911. I said there was this big, wild animal in the woods behind my house and that it had tried to attack me and that it got a hold of my dog. Animal control came out, arriving in under a half an hour. I spent that whole time sobbing my eyes out, knowing that we had narrowly escaped being killed. I saw one of the officers arrive and start to head out with a stick thing, that thing with the loop on the end, and I told him, "That is not going to do it. You need a gun." So he then told me, "Wait in the house." They were gone about 15 or 20 minutes, which didn't seem like enough time at all. And then they arrived back with basically no information. I remember wondering if they had just gone out looking for show and didn't really expect to find anything. Well, they didn't find the creature, and the one officer insisted it was just another dog that he had fought with. Nothing I said could convince them that it was this 7+ foot tall creature that was walking upright. Not a dog. But the more I tried to explain myself, the more I realized I looked like a crazy woman. I mean, Petey couldn't tell them anything. So trying to tell them about a monster amid my shaking and being unable to really get the words out clearly, who knows what they were thinking of me. For many weeks after that, Petey and I did not leave each other's side. I'm not sure who needed who more, but I'm guessing the need was pretty equal at that point. So let's just hope we never have to deal with that thing again. My name is Scott, and I'm a spelunker living near the Catskill Mountains of New York. For those of your listeners who aren't familiar with spelunking, it's basically cave exploring. This can be a dangerous hobby for anyone, so we make sure to use the right equipment and we always go with a group. Research is also important since there are countless reports of spelunkers who have died or disappeared in cave systems, basically because they were ill-prepared and didn't know what they were getting into. Well, I've been doing it since I was a kid, and I've seen weird things here and there, but I wanted to write in with this particular story that happened recently. Most of what we see in the caves are signs of people living there, hopefully just temporarily, and junk left behind. Once my sister and I even found a stray dog that we helped find its way out. A few weeks ago, when the weather was warm and dry, 4 friends and I decided to head to one of our favorite caves in the Catskills. I'm not going to mention the name of this cave since it was in the news a few years ago for a guy getting injured. He wasn't prepared and he ended up falling and breaking his heel, but I'd been there a few times with these same friends, and we knew what we were getting into. We had brought the basic gear and we were setting up in a small, clear area not far from the entrance, maybe 200 or 300 feet. Like I said, it was pretty dry and we had hot weather, so we were sure to pack a ton of water. And just to give you a sense of it, there were smaller trees around us, but mainly pine trees growing on and around the rocky outcroppings near the cave entrance. I finished getting ready first and I stood up to double check all my gear, including my helmet. We were chatting about what we should do later in the day, like maybe find a brewery or just head home and order pizza. 2 of the 4 friends were visiting from out of state, so this was sort of a vacation for them. As the others started to stand and check themselves, I heard a snapping sound off to my left, near the cave. I glanced back that way, assuming it was a smaller animal. In the woods, a lot of small animals can sound large, so I don't usually get too worried unless I see something to worry about. I scanned the area, didn't see anything, so I went back to chatting. But then, the smell came. The smell was unlike anything I had smelled before, like somebody left a pile of beef rotting in a trash can for weeks. It was so bad I could practically taste it, and from the looks on my friends' faces, they could too. We all instinctively held our arms over our noses and immediately started looking around for the source. My initial thought was that we were about to find a body, but it also seemed odd that the smell came so suddenly. We'd been in the area for at least half an hour at this point, and if there was a rotting body, we would have smelled it sooner. One friend broke off from the group, picked up a large stick, and started poking and searching the foliage to the right, away from the cave. I was looking more carefully into the woods now, and as I turned around slowly, I saw something near the cave. At first I thought it was a buck because of the antlers. Pretty big, 8-point, pretty noticeable since it was 200 feet away from us near the cave. I froze because something was off though. In my experience, deer usually run, but this one didn't. One of my friends, Trisha, caught on quickly and she froze too. The others noticed we were looking at something and soon they were all staring at it. The deer, or what we had thought was a deer, unfolded suddenly and got a few feet taller, which gave me the sensation that I was hallucinating. The thing then shifted closer to the opening of the cave, and a second later we were hit with that horrible smell again. It was sunny, but with the light coming through the trees, it looked like its body, on 2 legs by the way, had these spots of light coming through it, like there were holes in it or something. It moved a few feet closer and the smell got so bad that I actually gagged. Another guy and I grabbed big branches and we started backing up. My friend Dave, the one who had been looking around in the bushes, said, "What the hell is that thing?" Trisha grabbed her pack and started rushing backward toward the trail we'd come up. The rest of us broke out of our scared trances and we all did the same, scrambling back to the trail and then jogging down it. Dave was the last one out. He kept looking back and hollering that he couldn't see it. But that was a relief, but it still didn't stop his adrenaline rush. Within 10 minutes, we'd reached where we'd parked the car and we all piled in. It was a complete mess. We still had our gear on and we were all out of breath. Leighton was driving and gunning it back toward town. Once we cleared the deepest part of the woods, we finally started talking about what we had seen and comparing notes. We were all on the same page. It had definitely been a creature with a buck's head, standing on 2 legs, and it looked and smelled like it was decaying. Trisha, who had been a little closer, said the eye sockets were empty. That same day, we all hunkered down in a deli for lunch. Everyone did some digging online, and the best we could come up with was that there was a Wendigo up in that cave. I'm assuming it was just passing through since we had been there before and hadn't seen it, and there weren't any reports of it up there. But that's a cave we won't be visiting again. Not for a while, or without protection, at least. April 2007, Cumberland, Maryland. A few months ago, we got a new security system for our house that included 2 mounted cameras. One was on the doorbell, and another was a motion sensor camera that looked out over the backyard. We didn't live in a bad area or anything, but people stealing packages off of porches wasn't unheard of, and we did order a lot of stuff from Amazon. We also had 2 dogs, and when the camera detected motion, we got a notification. Soon, our dogs figured out they could activate the backyard sensor to let us know they wanted back inside. We had a huge yard in a rural area, so we let them out to run around the yard whenever they wanted. The system worked out well. That was, at least, until something started tripping our camera at all hours of the night. The little dinging notification would wake me or my husband up a few times a week, and it drove us crazy. At first, we just turned off phones at night, once the dogs were inside. But we were definitely still curious about what was out there. We tried watching the video, but the quality wasn't great in the dark, and we never saw anything clearly. Sometimes we thought we saw a blur at the edge of the yard, but it could have been a shadow or anything really. So we gave up and started to ignore the notifications. But a month later, one of our dogs came home injured, pretty badly. He had bloody scratches and bite mark punctures. He was whimpering like crazy, and we freaked out. We rushed him to the vet to get him all patched up, and luckily he's going to be okay. But the vet gave him a bunch of shots, just in case. When we asked what could have done it, The vet was stumped too. He said the bite marks were vaguely canine, but too big to be a domestic dog, and they didn't quite match anything he was familiar with. So for a while after that, we were really careful about keeping the dogs close to the house. We watched them all the time when they were in the yard, and we didn't let them stay out long. We also noticed that our dog that had been attacked had no interest in getting too far from the house. We talked about different ideas like fencing in a smaller area, but the dogs were really energetic and they loved being able to run. So we just decided to wait and see if anything else happened. So it had been months without incident, so we started cautiously letting the dogs out longer and not watching them every second. We were hoping that it had been just a freak occurrence. And for a while, everything seemed fine. But then one evening, a little before dusk, we heard them barking like crazy. We nervously ran outside, called to them. At first they didn't come, and they stayed at the edge of the property, barking and growling at something we couldn't see. We kept calling them, and it took a while, but eventually they did come back. That night I left my phone volume up. I don't know why, but I just wanted to know if something was out there after all, especially if it was whatever had previously attacked our one dog. So I couldn't sleep, and I kept alternating watching out the window and keeping an eye on the security system app. But by 1 a.m., nothing had come past, so I relaxed and fell asleep. Luckily, when the ding sounded on my phone, I was only half asleep. I shot up. I grabbed my phone and looked at the video and saw this dark blur again. Something was out there. I was sure of it now. I woke my husband and he grabbed a baseball bat because that was all we had, and we both slowly went downstairs without turning on any lights. We looked out the back door window and watched for the black blur. We didn't turn on the light because we didn't want to scare anything away or alert it to us being there before we got a good look. It took about 10 minutes before we saw something move. But there it was, big and dark, walking way down at the far edge of the property. And when I say walking, I mean walking upright, like a person, not on all fours. It was so weird. We'd been expecting an animal, but wondering if it was a person after all. Maybe somebody lurking around, looking to steal stuff. I'd been sure that the thing that had attacked our dog was the same thing in the backyard, but now I was confused. Did we have a dangerous wild animal on the loose and a creepy guy? What were the odds of that? We kept watching, hoping to get a better look so we could tell the police something useful if we needed to. Eventually it came closer to the house, just close enough for us to see it in the moonlight, and we saw fur. Fur everywhere. The person or thing was tall, really tall, but covered in fur. It didn't make any sense, and it was coming closer to the house now. If it came any closer, I planned to turn on the back floodlight and see everything. It took a few minutes, but it did come close enough. I reached over and flipped the light switch, flooding the backyard with light. The thing screeched, and it turned, and it ran, but not before we saw it clearly. We saw the tall, dark, furry body, and also the face. The horrible face. It was dog-like, with a canine-looking snout and long, sharp teeth. The worst part was the eyes, though, reddish, orange, and glowing as they glared at us before running off. The thing had looked like a demonic dog person. We called the police and animal control, but once we explained how we had seen this strange creature walking around with glowing eyes, they thought we were crazy. We even sort of thought we were too. I mean, how could this thing really exist? We got a half-hearted promise from the police that they would search the woods and set some traps, but we could tell that it probably would never happen. And, as we thought, they never did come back. Luckily, neither has that thing. At least, not yet. Let me know what you think about these stories in the comments below. And don't forget to check out Donovan Dread, who releases almost every single day. Also, if you like true crime, then check out Donovan Dread True Crime. There are new releases several times a week.